Hey everyone, I am your host of Anchor of Hope right here at Spero Family Services, Carleka Spann. Today's topic of discussion is going to be nurturing spiritual life connections with children and youth. And here I have two very special guests with me, Ms. Gina Ellis and also Pastor Victor Long. So I'm going to have them dive right in and just tell us a little bit about themselves because Ms. Gina Ellis, I know about her. Pastor Victor is a little new to me, so I want them both to say hello to you in their very own way. Thank you both for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thank you. So, Miss Gina, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
I am the spiritual life coordinator here at Spero. I also serve as an associate pastor at the First United Methodist Church. I have a lot of kids. Our journey began as foster parents and has grown into this. And it's been a blessing.
Okay. I know you've been a blessing to this entity and just so many colleagues of mine, coworkers, foster care children. You're pretty special around here.
Thank you.
Very, very special around here. Tell us, how long have you actually been with Spero?
I've been here almost a year.
Almost a year?
Almost a year as the spiritual life coordinator. As a foster parent,
Long time.
Like 7-8 years, probably, something like that. I'm not real sure.
Thank you for sharing that. Pastor Victor, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
I'm Victor Long. I'm the pastor of the First United Methodist Church in Mount Vernon, and I'm in my 15th year, which is kind of unusual for Methodist preachers. I served on the Spero Board of Directors for 10 years, and 2 of those years I was the chairperson.
Okay. Wow. So thank you again, both for joining us. And we're going to dive right in. We're just going to dive right in. So I'm going to start with Gina. What inspired you to pursue a career, not only with Spero, but in foster care and just kind of marry that with spiritual life and youth ministry?
It actually began before my husband and I ever got married. We were talking about how many kids we wanted to have. And he said, he always envisioned his family being 3 or 4 kids and then giving a kid that did not have a home and a family, those 2 things. And as our kids grew up, we have 4 biological children. And as they grew up, this never seemed like the right time. And then hired as the custodian at the First United Methodist Church. And every Sunday, Deb Pollux would bring kids to church from Spero. And I don't know, they touched my heart, and God moved us to finally move on that dream of adding to our family.
So it just gravitated.
Yeah, it did.
A natural passion.
It just was very organically grown.
Okay.
And continues to grow.
I love that. But I can see your passion as well, especially when you show up in the office and we get to kind of see you or see you on campus. So that's definitely evident. Pastor Victor, so was this like a calling for you to become a pastor?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Really started in high school, and it was that time of searching as my late teens, figuring out what I needed to do with my life and also experiencing a lot of depression and loneliness. And in the midst of that, I felt called to ministry. And so it's my senior year of high school is when I really owned up to that call.
Okay. I'm glad you said that because I have another question for both of you guys. Because in regards to knowing what your calling is, walking in your purpose and things like that, I know for me personally, sometimes even when you know God is talking to you about something, you can run from it. Did you run from it initially?
Well, I didn't run, but not until somebody else asked me if I felt God was calling me. Did I really admit it out loud?
Okay.
And just saying yes, though, didn't make it easy because I had some rough spots there.
Of course.
Between there and here. And when I doubted it, but I plugged along.
Okay.
Here I am.
How about you, Ms. Gina?
I actually recognized that I had a calling when I was a teen. However, I was raised in a faith tradition that did not allow women to even pray in church at that time.
Wow.
So there was no way they were going to let me work with kids, especially teenagers. And it was when I began to work at the First Church with Victor as my supervisor, I never forget the first time I showed up for work, he said, as you begin your ministry here at the First Church, and I thought, who's he talking to? I'm here to mop floors and clean toilets, you know. But it just organically grew out of serving at the church and working there.
Okay. But it reconnected you with the call that you had actually felt.
It did. It did reconnect that. It did put that back into perspective, and that's also what fired those dreams of growing our family through foster care, adoption, or guardianship as well.
Okay.
So
I love that. So when I actually use the term or say the word spiritual life, Pastor Victor, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think in a general sense, it's our connection with God or that beyond us and others and self. I think if I remember my Hebrew Bible correctly, God creates the first human being and refers to it as a nephesh, which is a bundle of appetites. And I think tending to that bundle of appetites within us is what spiritual life is about. But it primarily opens us up to God, to others, and to being a healthy self.
Okay, agreed. Ms. Gina?
I totally agree with everything he just said. To connect that to Spero and the anchor, I think my spiritual life is my anchor to God and others. It gives my life purpose. It's what gets me through difficult times. It's what, when I'm challenged in some way, I automatically revert back to my spiritual life. So I do think of it as an anchor.
Okay. I love that. And even though we're saying spiritual life, to me, it's actually really just a way of life.
Yes.
Period. Would you both agree with that?
Way of being.
Yeah, way of being.
Way of being.
Absolutely. Pastor Victor, how would you say you see spiritual life actually manifesting in the youth at church?
Well, I'm not the youth director, so I don't spend as much time. But, this is an era in history when kids don't go to church.
Okay.
And people don't go to church like they used to. But what we found is kids and youth and adults are still spiritually hungry. And what our youth director has done is he's got a sizable youth group, but a minority of them are church kids. They're kids from the community and they're their friends, and they can talk more openly about faith and the things that nobody talks about anywhere else. So I think there's a great spiritual hunger in our world that used to be addressed by the church, and the church isn't always meeting those needs, or the church doesn't appeal to a lot of folks. But I know in our church, our youth director has been able to kind of tap into that, non-judgmentally accepting, open conversation to talk about, matters of the heart and matters of faith.
Okay.
That's fair?
Yes.
I would agree with that too. A light bulb went off, or actually you said something that just stuck when you used the word non-judgmental. I think that definitely would make church more attractive for youth, people in general, but especially youth. And it sounds like your youth pastor probably has that kind of demeanor to draw the youth in to the church community. Okay. Miss Gina, what about you? Just being a foster mom, a mom in general, what would you say, I don't know, your thoughts are on the spiritual life kind of manifesting in youth at church?
Well, I see the manifestation of, and I don't quite know how to word this, but like when I have a chat time every week with some of the young people in residential.
Like in person? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And their willingness to share their thoughts, doubts, fears, dreams with me, I think that's a manifestation of that connection through the spiritual life activities that we do.
Okay.
They know it's a safe place. It's non-judgmental. I'm not there to press them into believing the same things I believe. I'm just there to help guide them.
Okay.
And answer questions when I can. I'm also very open to saying, I don't know. I don't have a clue. Let me talk to some people and do some studying,
It sounds like, though, in your role, just being a listening ear is very effective.
And I think that's probably the key to the whole thing, is just being willing to sit with them and listen. And not look at them and say, but why are you doing this? Or how come you said that? And that's not my part. That's not my job.
Right. Just to provide a safe space.
Yeah, my job is just to provide a safe space with a listening ear and a loving heart.
Well, there's a lot to be said for just being a presence.
Yes.
You talk about non-judgmental, non-anxious, just being a solid presence who loves and cares for others can be spiritually nourishing,
Well, I think it's a perfect example.
Yeah.
I think our lives, as we live our own spiritual lives, is the model that they need to see.
Right.
That's just a part of our daily being, and it's not something we put on for just this chat time.
Right.
That's truly who we are.
You made a really good point too when you said that you're not above telling them, like if they ask you something and you don't have the answer, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we as parents or just adults, sometimes we can come across as maybe a know-it-all or unrelatable.
Right.
And when you say, hey, you know what, I don't know, let me find out for you.
Well,
or let me check into that for you.
Right, exactly.
I think
And
it definitely makes them feel more comfortable.
my own experience has been that a lot of the things that I was taught as a child, I no longer believe those things because I grew into my own understanding of how that relates to me and my world and my life today.
A lot has changed, though.
Yes.
You even brought that up about women in ministry, and even now. So much has changed.
But I think it's also been helpful. I think both you and I have been able to do this to say that we don't believe that.
Right.
And especially kids who've endured religious trauma, when they come up with something and you say, well, that's not what I think, that's not what I believe.
That's not how I understand.
Because it then gives them permission to kind of question something that's maybe hung over them.
And I think that's key to it. Yeah, I think that's key is being open to hearing. I call it, I will tell the kids over in the chat, this is Gina-ology.
That's okay.
This is Gina-ology.
Not genealogy, Gina-ology.
Yeah, this is not genealogy or theology. This is just Gina-ology.
Okay.
This is how I have come to understand what this means to me in my life as I walk through life daily.
Okay.
And what do you think? And then they tell me what they think. And I never argue. I don't disagree. I just accept what they say. And most of the time I will even ask them, well, can you tell me more about why you think that? And there have been times they've taught me.
Right. Okay.
I didn't teach them. They taught me.
Yeah, it happens. It happens all the time.
It does. It happens more often than I would care to admit, honestly.
But there are a lot of these youth here, and they're adults in the church who really have been burdened, if not harmed, by a lot of what I would call bad religion. And I think it's sometimes incumbent upon us to say, that's I don't believe that's accurate.
Okay.
That's not how I see God as somebody who wishes harm.
Exactly.
You,
right. Exactly.
And they have to see that other people can think differently and believe differently, behave differently.
Right.
And I think that's been a big tool for you, both Deb,
yes,
working with these kids.
Yeah.
So let's detour real quick and circle back on the lines of something you were just sharing, because I know it's something that I faced and it was very challenging having to talk to this youth in particular. But when you have, because it sounds like you have, I'm sure you probably have, ran into a youth with experiencing some religious trauma or just having the wrong frame of mind for reasons that were kind of, the seed was planted probably at an early age by the wrong people. How have you been able to maybe redirect or face that challenge with them when their mind was made up and they had a negative idea or concept about the church or religion?
Well, for me, I often will share, and this has been very helpful for me because it opens doors for conversation, which is what I think we're here for.
Absolutely.
I will tell them about something that happened to me as a young person that was very traumatic, that I questioned, and I was really angry at God. And, I tell them it's okay. You can get mad at God. God will take it. He'd rather you be honest and know him. You can't have him as a friend unless you're willing to share all of yourself.
Correct.
And just sharing with them that this is what happened to me, but I moved past that because that's not who I want. That's not where I wanted to stay.
Okay.
I wanted to grow.
I like that.
And that's been very beneficial for me, just sharing my own story.
Right. Transparency.
Yeah. And saying, I was mad. And I even...
We've all been there.
Yeah.
At some point in time, because of something that's happened
and there was a point where I quit going to church.
Yeah.
I quit going to church for a year or two. And I'm very honest and open about sharing that. And this is why I did. And I was mad at God because I felt like God let me down. I didn't blame what happened on the people who did the things. I blamed it on God. which is often what we do.
We do sometimes.
So
that's true.
Yeah.
Tough spots to be in.
Yeah.
Do you have a certain situation or maybe something?
Well, I don't remember a specific one, but a lot of it is just using I statements because others say or believe this, and it may be a real common thing in religion, but I believe this and think this for these reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying you need to believe it too, but I'm showing that there is a different way to think or believe or function, and to give them space to begin processing maybe what they think. I mean, at root for me and my faith is a God of love who cares about us, and a God who does not wish harm upon us, and a God who's not there to mete out punishment for every indiscretion, a God of love and grace who wants us to be whole.
Exactly.
And that sadly is so contrary to a lot of the religion that many people have been fed through their lives.
Agreed. My next question goes hand in hand with what we're already on the topic of. So for parents, raising children who might have questions, who are facing certain things, what are some practical ways that you would say parents could make that spiritual connection with their kiddos, their children, no matter what their age are?
I'll be honest, I never really thought about any of that when I was raising my own biological children.
Mm-hmm.
I just never even considered it. We just did. Like, we prayed. They saw and heard their father and I pray.
Together?
Yeah. They saw and heard us reading the Bible or disagreeing about what we thought some scripture meant. And we didn't hide any of that. We were very open about it because we disagreed. I was of one faith and he was of another faith.
Wow.
And the basis was the same, but the theology was quite different.
Okay, I can see that.
He won me over. he won me over. Eventually I saw the rightness and saw the light, but it took a process. But I think that just seeing you as parents model your own spiritual life in prayer, studying and reading scripture, taking time to take a walk in nature and observing God's presence in nature. I think nature is a big thing for me. And I think a lot of times we miss those things, that God's presence is around us, surrounds us constantly.
So leading by example.
Yeah, lead by example and let them see you doing it as a part of your normal daily life.
Okay, I like that. You'd like to add anything?
Well, I agree with that. And it goes back to that sense of presence. I mean, if you are a loving, faith-filled presence in their lives, they're more apt to maybe embrace that for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just trying to make them into good kids and hit them over the head and say, God wants you to act this way, usually not very effective.
Correct.
And also people have the attitude, we'll take them to church, and that's where they'll learn how to be a Christian or whatever.
Yeah.
And that really isn't that effective.
Right.
It's that fundamental relationship between parent and child, embodying it, modeling it, and being a positive example of that. And I think of my grandmother. My parents certainly took me to church, but my grandmother loved me unconditionally. And I think grandparents often embody the love of God in ways that nobody else does. And that communicates faith or inspires faith. She loved God and she loved me. And that was a profound influence upon my life.
So just being able to witness their daily walk.
Right.
Yeah.
I think often we forget that we are evidence of God's presence.
Right.
We are modeling. They should be modeling God's love.
And we're always being watched.
Yes.
Somebody's always watching.
Yes. We are. We're being watched.
Mm-hmm.
And they pay far more attention than we do.
They definitely do. What would you guys say is maybe like, there's so many challenges, but what would you say is like really up there or high on the list as far as a challenge that our youth face in developing spiritual lives today? Something that is just really prevalent in your mind, Miss Gina?
Cell phones.
Okay.
Cell phones, laptops, the availability of that, I think it's distracting. I think also the fact that we live in, like, I call it a microwave society. We're instant gratification.
Right now.
And oftentimes we don't get instant gratification. So then we get discouraged and we feel as though God abandoned us. Mm-hmm. When in reality, God's still there. Mm-hmm. He's still working,
It's just not happening.
It's just not happening as fast as you want it. But I think that's two of the biggest ones is that, outside distractions from the world.
I agree with that. That's definitely on the list of things I would create myself. What about you?
Well, I mean, I agree. I mean, there have always been distractions, but the digital world just engulfs everyone. I mean, to the point where, and we talked about parents a while ago, parents are caught up in it and kids are caught up in it, and there's no real opportunity for relationship or connection or conversation.
Right.
And we've even lost the art of being able to have a conversation about things. God is often found in silence. And we live in a noisy world, full of all sorts of sounds and sights and distractions. And often we have to stop that and just be silent and still and encounter the presence of God. I also think religion, for most folks, has become a head thing where people think, if I get the right ideas and the right list of beliefs, then somehow I'm religious or connected with God. But it goes back to the heart and to your being and your whole self, and how you relate, how you treat people is part of, is a primary function of religion, and opening oneself up to God to receive that grace and power in how you live your life in community with others is what it's about. And when we silo ourselves in front of a cell phone, we don't experience that.
Right. And we're saying cell phone, but clearly social media.
Social media.
Just the whole digital culture that's really shifting a lot.
It is.
We can become totally consumed by it.
And it's a distraction, not just for kids, but for adults.
Oh, it's
So
it's across the board.
When you don't have the discipline from your parents or discipline even for yourselves to step away from it, not go down that rabbit hole, it definitely.
Our dinner hour is a no
cell phone,
no electronic devices are present.
Well, Gina, you've pulled the internet off sometimes when your kids weren't really engaging.
Oh yeah.
Turn it off.
Just turn that off. And actually, right now it's set where at 8:00 it goes off. It just automatically goes off, and it does not come back on until 6:00 the next morning.
Okay.
Because my 9-year-old that lives with us, she would be up at 5:00, and I'm like, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
We're not going to get on your Kindle right now. You've got to do these things. And so that's been very effective in them knowing, hey, mom or Meemaw has the power.
I like that. I like that you're implementing that. I know some parents don't. And I know some parents are afraid to. So, because they don't know, they feel like it would interfere with the relationship with the child.
Absolutely.
Or how are they going to feel or how are they going to react? So, I think that's huge.
Yeah. And as foster parents, I don't know, once it's been 2 years ago, maybe, that we got fiber optic internet, possibly that long ago. But before that, when you came to our house, cell phone signal was non-existent and there was no internet.
Oh my goodness.
And so a lot of foster kids would visit us and go, we can't live here.
Well, they have to communicate. They have to actually
I'm going to talk to my people.
Yeah,
and I was
that
like,
changes things.
You might have to go pick up the thing on the wall and call.
Yeah.
Put your fingers in there and dial.
It's like a thing of the past.
Yes, it is.
Really?
It is. But it was actually kind of nice. I'm not going to lie.
I bet. What spiritual practices would you say you recommend for children to become more engaged spiritually?
I think prayer.
Okay.
I have a 9-year-old granddaughter that lives with us, and she knows that we pray every morning and we pray at night. It's just a habit. It's a part of our routine. She embraces that wholeheartedly to the point where, she'll say, we need to pray, Meemaw. We got to pray right now, and so I think that's important that, you incorporate that into your daily routine. She also sees me studying and reading my Bible, and she has her own Bible, and, we're not zealous about that she has to do this every day, but it's one of the books that she's encouraged to pick up her children's Bible and read. Also, we do things like journaling. She's just 9, but she has her own little journal, and she, what she can't write out in sentences, she draws in pictures. Okay. She has a Bible that I'll read scripture, show her where it's at in her Bible, and then she's allowed to draw pictures of what that means and represents to her.
Okay.
And I think those are all things that just kind of almost unknowingly,
I would agree,
become a part of your spiritual life.
Yeah, I would agree.
So,
but you're implementing that at an early age.
Yeah.
So to her, it makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
it does.
again, that just goes back to learned behavior.
Yes, and we do, like I say, nature is a big part of my life. Where we live, we have 50 acres of nothing but hills and creeks and wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And we often go out, walk in the creek, and just talk about God's presence in the world and the animals and different things like that. And that's just kind of a part of our normal life.
Right.
And it's not something that I teach. It's just something that happens.
You do. It's your actual daily walk.
We actually are doing these things, you know. And so it becomes a part of her life too.
Yeah, I love that. Pastor Victor, can you add anything?
Well, one thing about prayer is I think even adults are surprised to learn that there isn't one rote way to pray.
Mm-hmm.
And there are very creative ways to pray. There are ancient ways to pray that aren't just sitting there reciting something to God. And I found kids and youth especially are really open to that. Just the different forms of prayer. There's a way of praying the scriptures that I've heard is very effective with youth. I know it is with adults. But there are multiple ways to encounter God that often people don't realize. I think conversation can be a spiritual practice.
Agreed.
Being honest and real with one another. And then I've come to learn that I think curiosity is a good spiritual practice, and teaching kids, especially youth, to be curious and to ask questions, because I think it's only through asking questions that we grow in our faith, which is not the message you usually hear from the church. The church usually says, don't ask questions.
Right.
But what I discovered in my life is it's healthy for your faith, for your spiritual life, to ask questions, because that's how you grow.
Yeah.
And teach them to be curious about nature, about the world, about people, about God.
I love that you just shared that, because so often, I know not just for children, but adults too, they think that, okay, there's this cookie cutter way, or I have to do it this way. And I've even heard some people say, well, I don't know how to pray. Well, there's really no wrong way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Now you can have a mentor or a pastor to kind of, help you develop, but just getting started, there's no wrong or right way to go.
Well, in my life, I'm also Benedictine, which is the big word. But what the Benedictines taught me is that prayer is just as much about listening as it is talking. And so many of us just think of prayer as talking to God, which is part of it. But if you listen, you often hear God speak, not audibly, but in your heart, in your life, in your relationships, God speaks. And the art of prayer, I think, is learning to listen. To really listen to life and to your heart and to people and the world around you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at y'all. Y'all said that together.
We're good.
We rehearsed this many times.
I feel like that was planned. That's okay. So how would you feel about sharing maybe like one impactful story about a young person that you encountered and you saw like the aftermath or the effects that kind of helped them get over a hurdle or a challenge or something regarding something maybe spiritual that they were facing?
Well, I have that right now. It's ongoing in my family.
Okay.
We have an 18-year-old that we've been her legal guardians. She's now not, but she still lives at home with us. When she moved in, she had been raised in a faith of, I know it's Mormonism, and I know very little about that faith. But she was very anti-church. She didn't, and when she came to live with us and she found out that I was children's pastor at the church, she was like, wait, I hope you don't expect me to go to that church. And I was like, you don't have to go if you don't want to. And if you do go into church with us on Sunday morning, you can sit down in my office and play on your phone or do whatever. You don't have to go and attend the church. That simple affirmation that she was not going to be made to go to church. And we never did that.
Yeah.
And I think she's only been to church, maybe 5 or 6 times at most. She has struggled a bit. She lost her biological grandmother. Her biological grandfather now has cancer and has been told he only has a few weeks to live. She has really struggled. But the other night she called me. She was down taking care of her grandfather, helping care for him. She called and she said, hey, my dad told me, and she gave me this big long spiel about how her dad's very anti-God. And she said, it just scares me to death. I know you know the answers. Can you help me walk through this? And I was like, well, first of all, I don't have the answers. Second of all, I walk with you through this. But the third thing is that it has to be where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be where I'm leading you. It has to be where you and God are going. And she has done a 360.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she has completely turned around. Said she's still not ready to go to church, but she said, all that prayer you've been doing, that's working.
Yeah.
That's working because I feel like God's doing something inside of me. And I was like, okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Her brother, who we were his legal guardians, he has struggled with addiction
Mm-hmm.
and alcohol and drugs. And he called the other night and he said, I've been clean 7 weeks now. And that's
a big
major.
deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. And he said, I just want to thank you. I know you're praying. And I was like, yeah, I have been.
Mm-hmm.
But I, and the thing of it is I've never told them. I've never pushed it upon them.
Mm-hmm.
They just see it as a part of it. They just see it's my life.
I think that's your sauce too, though.
Yeah.
Meaning
I think
not
so.
Forcing.
No, it is.
You have to.
Right. Well,
that.
you can't scare people into believing in a God they can't see.
Exactly.
You can't, and them have a real honest relationship.
Yeah.
They have to grow that themselves with your guidance and help. But I think scaring, especially young people,
it
has the opposite
effect. To me, it just
effect.
pushes them further away.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite effect.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, story you want to share?
Well, no dramatic stories, but this has been told a lot. Back, before COVID, Reverend Deb Pollux used to bring a lot of the youth to our church. And I think they experienced a lot of hospitality and friendliness and even respect, as being treated not as, clients, but as just folks coming to church. And, I don't know this, I can't tell the story in great detail, but basically a group of kids went on run on Saturday night, stayed out late, but had to be in church the next morning at 8:30 because they didn't want to miss church. Mm-hmm. It's like, who would have thought that group really was so hung up on church, but they knew it was a safe place where people welcomed them and loved them. And to me, that was just such a powerful image of acceptance and love and caring and respect. And I think a lot of those kids just don't experience anywhere else.
I agree.
They went on run, but they made sure they were
in church the next morning.
Yeah. It's usually the opposite. They want to run away from the church,
Yeah.
And that was just a very powerful thing for me to show how just that really became important in their lives.
I could see that working in the school district, you being familiar too. Sometimes school is that place.
Yep.
So it's always refreshing to hear that church is that place. Because you never know what's happening in the home or family environment. That sometimes is often their safe space.
Right.
Church, school, places like that. We have covered just a melting pot of things today. And thank you guys, not just for joining me, but for your transparency, stepping away from your daily lives, your jobs. I really do appreciate that. But we talked about prayer. We talked about relationships, kind of like some key points and even some pointers that you would share with parents. In closing, like what would be maybe a takeaway that you would like to share with our listeners about, their children and connecting spiritually or growing in their spiritual lives? Maybe just a pointer you would like to leave for them as we conclude. I
think for myself, it's model it.
Okay.
You have to model your own spirituality.
So walk the walk.
You got to walk the walk and not just talk it. You got to put it out there, and you have to be the same person inside the walls of your own home that you are outside the walls of your own home.
Okay.
You can't be two different people. You got to be your real, true, authentic self.
That simplifies it.
Yeah.
Really
for me,
does.
that's key to it.
Yeah, I would agree. I like that. So, absolutely.
Well, I don't know if this is what you're asking, but as a person of faith, as somebody who follows Jesus, for me, the essence of religion, spirituality is love.
Mm-hmm.
And people think that's fluff, but love is hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to place love at the center of who we are and everything we do. And that's what transforms lives. And I think we're able to love because what I believe that God loves us so much.
Yeah.
And we have to live in love and walk in love. And that's what will change the world.
I like that. So
pass it on.
So I changed my mind. Let's just touch on that real quick. No, seriously, because with children, though, if they see that they're in a space where they're loved unconditionally, whether they're doing something right, doing something wrong, it could change the trajectory of their life.
Absolutely. And I think that's the
Yeah.
bottom line of so many kids that have issues is they've not experienced
Right.
unconditional love from a person of significance
Right.
in their lives.
I
And
agree with
in
that.
fact, they've been abused.
Right.
And that not only misshapes who they are,
Mhm.
it misshapes who they ultimately think of God as being.
Agreed.
You know?
Well, that's like Michael, one of my children. He totaled my van,
Mm-hmm.
and he was devastated,
Mhm.
and he just knew, you guys are going to kill me. And we didn't.
Right.
We were like, well, it could have been any of us.
I remember,
Yeah.
the grace,
You know, and that's where his journey to being clean for 7 weeks began,
Mhm.
honestly, was that wreck.
And I love that for
Yeah.
you and him.
And
The
that
way
we
you handled
didn't
it.
respond. We responded out of love
Mhm.
and grace, just like God
that's
does
hard.
when we screw up.
That's hard.
Yeah, because
It's
we
hard.
screw up too.
Yeah.
We screw up too, you know, and God just keeps offering that love and the forgiveness and the mercy and grace.
But
Yeah.
love is always wanting the best for the other.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily indulging the other
Right.
or overlooking. It's about wanting the best
Mhm.
for the other.
Right. No matter what.
Right.
No matter what.
what.
Yes.
So again, you guys, we have covered just a melting pot of amazing things. And I just wanted to share with you, we have a new slogan, or our tagline is I hope. So what is one thing that you hope for?
I hope that all of God's children, which is everyone, will know that they are loved and valuable, that they will feel safe, and that they will be whole.
I hope those things, but I also hope it's something that those who watch this podcast will walk away and be encouraged to share that love themselves with their children and other young people.
Okay.
I think that's really key.
I love that. Thank you again, both. I really appreciated you joining us today. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to our viewers. And as we exit this podcast, please know that there are more amazing podcasts on the way. We cannot wait to share them with you. I have been your host, Carleka Spann, and you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube as well. Please stay tuned for our next episode.